Hello and welcome to the DeerLand Podcast. It's episode number 3. We're live on location here at Sellens Deer Camp in Northeast Missouri. I'm joined today by our resident land specialist, Mr. Tyler Sellens, and our big buck killer could not make it here tonight. So in his place, we've got somebody that's equally as good looking and a lot wiser. We've got Walter Sellens, Tyler's dad, to maybe teach us all a few things about deer season.
There.
All right. So, hey, how we doing, guys?
Doing well.
Good.
My belly's full.
Yes, that was very good. I had antelope for the first time tonight.
And it was good.
It was very good. It was chicken fried, I guess you'd call it, right out of the cast iron skillet.
You bet.
And very delicious. So a little fresh horseradish, ground horseradish on top. First off, thanks for letting me invade your hunting camp down here.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
It is opening day of Missouri centerfire rifle season, and
that's almost a national holiday.
It is, and I'm always a little bit jealous because obviously we have to wait until this Friday in Illinois to get out and bring the equalizer out, and I could have definitely used that today, but I'm sure that our later gun opener has its advantages when it comes to the deer population as well. So
very much so.
Well, I guess we've got some big news, and maybe we've got some people that the only reason they're listening is they want to hear the story of my deer. A week ago tonight, I think I was watching Tyler Sellens do a somersault out of the back of my electric buggy trying to throw my deer into the back of it that I had shot.
Hey, I got a 10 on the dismount.
Yeah, I thought I'd broke his neck, but he survived.
I didn't hear all those details.
Oh, man, it was quite a show, I'll tell you. So I was very fortunate to have a chance to fill a tag, be my second archery buck. Was my biggest deer to date.
A nice one.
Very nice deer. At the time, I wasn't sure what deer that it was. And then even once we walked up on it, we weren't sure exactly. We thought it was a different one and then realized that it wasn't that one. But then it all kind of come together, and it was a deer that I had history with since 2015. Had not seen him yet this year. And as far as I know, none of the neighbors had seen any pictures of him either. The one neighbor had one picture of him last year. I had a few pictures of him last year. 2016, he was very, very visible, and that's the year that I thought I could really get onto this deer. He was showing up quite regularly.
Oh, yeah?
I seen him during bow season. I just wasn't in the right position. I think he's a 7.5-year-old deer. The pictures I have of him in 2015, he could just be a super stud 3-year-old, but I mean his body really looks filled out like a 4-year-old.
He looked big in the picture. He looked like a big, heavy chest.
Yes, and he just was a pretty typical 10-pointer then. You know, he just had little crab claw G4s on each side, and actually it's kind of an ironic situation. New Year's Eve 2015, I had a scrape that was still kind of going, and I had some breeding action going on camera that year. Well, at this one particular scrape, I had this deer and another 2-year-old deer go at it, locking horns and just sparring in 2 episodes within about an hour and a half span that night. And this deer that I just shot last weekend got his butt whipped both times by this 2-year-old deer. Well, so this 2-year-old deer, who is now a 5-year-old deer this year, is the deer that I've been after. And he's been consistent. I believe I know exactly where he's bedded at. He's bedded on my farm. Doesn't happen very often. I have a 35-acre piece of land, a lot of does bedding there. Very rarely do I have a mature buck that's sticking around, but this guy is, and I've got a good pattern on him. He has been my focus this season.
So what's his name?
I don't name deer.
Mike's not one for naming deer.
No, I
don't like all deer have names anymore.
They do. And I just don't have an imagination. That's my problem is I can't get creative.
I don't know how you don't name deer for as many times as you know what camera they've been in front of at what time and what day.
And I do, and I know that. And this deer has become a problem because because I keep talking about him, and Tyler and the other guys are like, "What deer are you talking about?" I'm like, the only thing I can come up with is I had this deer in front of me as a 2-year-old, and he was a nice 2-year-old, and I let him walk. So I call him the deer that I passed as a 2-year-old. I guess I should maybe call him the mule deer
buck.
The mule deer buck. He has a flyer coming off of one of his G2s that's really deep, and when you get just the right angle, he looks like a mule deer. It looks like it's a split, but it's actually just a flyer that comes off to the side of it. So maybe that's what I should call him, is the mule deer buck.
Let's just call him Muley.
Muley, there we go. So
named him first deer.
Yep.
But he's a whitetail.
Yes,
Muley's a whitetail.
And normally it's the Big 10 or the split G2 or the split G3 or that's kind of how we name them. I know Louis, he's got a name for every deer that's ever walked by a camera of his. So I should probably get a little bit more creative, but I don't. So anyways, those 2 deer were on that camera. Well, then here we are 3 years later, and I happened to take the older of the one that had gotten whipped, and I'm still after this other one, and he has had my number. Actually, the morning of last Saturday, I had him at 19 yards, this mule deer buck that I was after. He had crossed my big field, come into the timber. Didn't have my grunt call with me. I had left it in the blind, so I didn't have a chance to try to see if I could get him to come my way. He went into the timber. I presumed that he was there, to check for does and could possibly be in there bedding. And then about an hour and a half later, I just happened to look at my phone to see what time it was. It was like 10:30. It was getting later in the morning, and I was trying to figure out how late I was going to sit there. So I went to reach my right pocket and pulled my phone out. And as I went down to look, my eyes go down, and I catch 19 yards, and there he is staring right at me. And he had come in from a direction that I was hoping he wouldn't. Any other direction that a deer were to come, if he'd have been coming the other way, if he was headed south instead of north, I could have seen him coming, and I would have had cover by the time he stepped out. I mean, I would have been all right. So. So
anyway, the best laid plans usually go
out
the door.
And he had been up there, and I knew he'd been bedded. I mean, he had to have. I didn't see him come out anywhere else. And I was hoping that when he come and crossed this ditch that was in front of me, that he would come out to this little clearing where a lot of the does come. It's like a little inside corner of a field. And I was hoping he was going to come up through that, and I could see him. And then once he stepped out into that inside corner of the field, then I have plenty of opportunity to shoot him. But he was just going to continue on, down this inside of the timber. And we just seen each other at the exact same time. And he was headed towards my wind, the wind in this position. It's a new stand location. I'd never hunted it before. I'm finding out that it's hard to hunt with the wind. No matter what you do, the wind seems to be blowing down into the timber. My farm has a lot of big valleys and stuff in it, and that plays havoc on the wind. So regardless, he stopped. We looked at each other for a while. I froze. He turned around and took like 2 steps back the other way, and then he stopped again. And I had grabbed my bow, and, if it wouldn't have been so thick, I probably could have got a shot. But there was no shooting lanes, and I quickly realized that this isn't going to work. So he took those couple steps. He stood there for, 5 or 6 seconds, and then he bounded off, ran 25, 30 yards, crossed this little ditch, and then he gets onto the hillside in front of me, and then he stops and he just walks away. Yeah. So I'm not sure how spooked he was.
Didn't sound like he spooked much.
No. Did he come from the southwest?
Yes. So he come
across that ditch already.
Yep. He somehow got across that ditch. Of course, it had been raining. Everything was just quiet. And even when he bolted and I was watching him and he ran away, you couldn't hear anything. I mean, it was like he was walking on air.
If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, you would have known.
You would have never known that it happened. That's right. So to say that I was discouraged was an understatement. Yeah. And I've done very well this year. I went into this season, and I think I even said it on a podcast towards the beginning. My season was a success before the season ever opened. I've done so much habitat work to the farm and food plots and all of this stuff that I just feel like I've had a successful season. So whereas in years past, I'm highly stressed, I'm highly frustrated. I feel that if I don't see a deer by the rut's over, that my season's over with. I've had very few sightings of mature deer, let alone encounters with them. But I went into this season just saying, you know what, it's already good. So I had done a lot of scouting. I've got a couple new stand sites that I hadn't had before, and again, did a lot of habitat work around, and I think it's probably paying off.
But that's half the fun of deer hunting, is the fact that you go out and do the pre-planning and harvesting animals, just the
icing on the cake.
The pinnacle of what has taken place, all your planning.
It is,
hard work.
And it was a long summer and a lot of work. So, and I think that's part of it. Maybe why I had some success is just because I wasn't stressing about it.
You got to relax and have fun with it.
Yep, and I've been trying to do that. So, but that morning I was very frustrated, and here's the reason why. If this deer would have been, a bigger deer, even that I didn't know, that was just passing through, I don't think it would have bothered me at all, because he was probably just passing through. I'm not going to see him again.
Right.
But this is a deer that I know is living on me, that I have a lot of history with, that I've got patterned pretty darn well, and I feel is very killable. And you don't get that very often on these small pieces. You hear a lot of people saying, I'm going out to hunt this particular deer, or, I'm in his bedroom or whatever. I don't have that opportunity very often. But this deer I do, and I've had, this is my 4th year of history with him. So even though he's going to score less than the deer that I shot last Saturday, he means more just because of the history. Yeah. So I was frustrated. I thought, man, you hate to spook deer, because you don't know what they're going to do. But again, I thought, well, he's not that spooked, so he may come back. So I went back home. Played with the kids for a while and just kind of unwound, and then about noon the kids were going to lay down and take a nap. I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a nap too. So I laid down, took a nap, didn't set an alarm or anything. Well, next thing you know, I woke up, it was like 3:30.
Oh my.
I thought, uh-oh.
You should be in the stand.
Yes. So then I thought, well, maybe I'm not even going to hunt tonight. I've already blew it here. I finally decided, well, I'll run out and I'll sit in this banks blind that's in my small field in my food plot. It's only 120 yards from the house, so get in there pretty quick. But I needed to hunt. So I went out there. Honestly, zero expectations whatsoever to see a buck, a shooter buck. Figured I'd see a couple does because it's right off some doe bedding, and that's what I was banking on. But
still nice to go sit on your own property and watch the deer.
It is, and I love that spot. It's the same field that I shot my 2015 buck out of. It's the same spot where the last couple of years I've bailed on it when the rut has come and went to my quote-unquote rut stands and then watch shooter deer come in and out of that field.
Or check trail cameras and realize after the fact you should have been there.
Yes. So last year, I moved and I watched the deer with my own eyes and then checked cameras, and there was even more. So it's a good spot, especially early season. So it's November 3rd, and my farm seems to do very well from about the 28th of October through the 3rd of November in that week time frame.
That's the best time to be out there.
It is, and I think I have a doe or two that seems to come in early every year from what I have gathered, and that's why I start seeing these bucks coming through pretty early. So you definitely aren't going to kill one from the couch, and so I went out there and just tried to have a good attitude about it. And got in the blind. I actually bumped a deer walking right into the field in the southwest corner of this field. I was walking up this little trail that I have, and then all of a sudden I heard a deer bust out. I could tell it was a little spike buck, and he was bedded right where I had to walk by. And so he took off. I thought, well, I guess at least it was him that I spooked and nothing else. So I just went in and got into the blind, got set up. And I sat there for a little while, and then all of a sudden here come that spike buck out. I'm like, well, he wasn't that spooked, So I had the wind when that happened, so I think he just heard something. I don't even think he's seen me. He just heard something and took off. So I'm sitting there, and then there was another little basket rack 7-pointer that was out. And them two were dinking around with each other. They would be on the other side of the draw in my bigger field. I could see them through the timber, and then they would like walk down towards that draw, and then they would walk away. And so my big field, my small field is separated by a 25-yard wide, 20-yard wide draw that runs through there. And it's pretty thick towards the end. It used to be thick all the way through, and Tyler and I went in and cut a bunch of honeysuckle a couple of years ago.
Good for you. Get rid of the honeysuckle.
Yes, open some of that up.
It's coming back.
It is. It's coming back. So that's another podcast that I've got some ideas that hopefully we can work on it. But the end of that, the east end of that, had always been super thick. And my 2015 buck, that's where he died at, was in that really thick stuff. And these young bucks were just kind of messing around with that. And I didn't know what they were doing, but I kept my eye on them. But I'm still trying to watch the field to see, what may pop out there. And this went on for, I don't know, quite a while, half hour maybe. And then all of a sudden, the basket rack, he kind of took off the other direction. He headed off south, and again, they were across the draw as I was watching them. Well, then the spike buck, he kind of comes through the opening that I have to get from one field to the other, comes out towards the food plot, and he kept looking to the east towards the power lines like something was up over there. And so I was looking with the binoculars into that timber, see if I could see something moving around, and I didn't see anything. So then he's just feeding on the edge of the food plot, and he was working towards me a little bit and still kind of feeding, and then he would look back to that draw real quick, and then he'd go feed, and he just kept doing this over and over. Well, then all of a sudden he decided he was going to go down towards that draw and check it out. So he walks down through, and it's real tall grass, probably 4-foot tall grass on the edge of it there. And I watch him, and he goes and he's standing in this tall grass. His tail is just about on the edge of it. And so I'm watching him for a while, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm tired of looking at this stupid spike buck.
Yeah,
so,
you want to see something big.
Yes. So I quit looking at him. I'm like, all right, he's there. I don't know what he's doing. And with these young deer, you can't try to figure out what they're doing because they don't know what they're doing half the time.
Young bucks.
Yes. So.
Heck, the old bucks don't know what they're doing.
Well,
either.
Yes.
The young ones.
There are times where, no one knows what's going on. But so I decided to stop watching him, and I'm just out checking the field out, looking straight ahead and over the food plot. And all of a sudden, that spike buck come by me, Mach 3 with his hair on fire. Just boom, he was gone. Really? I thought, what the heck? So I turn and I look over, and there's this big buck standing there. And he had ran out to the edge of the field, ran this spike buck off, and then the buck that I ended up shooting, he stopped and he turned around and then he faced back towards that draw that he had come out of. And he's just standing there, just posed, just like a statue.
How far is he now?
44 yards.
Oh. Last podcast, Mike.
We had a discussion about this. So I'm going to run through my thought processes when this all happens. So there's a couple caveats here, I guess. For one, this is only the second shooter deer that I've ever had, within 50 yards of bow range where there was a shot. So I don't have a lot of experience with this. It happens very fast, and there's a lot of stuff you have to go through in your mind when this does happen.
Right.
Was not expecting it. So there he is standing there right out this window, the same window that I had just shot a doe out of the week before. And I think, oh man, that might be a shooter deer. And I couldn't figure out what deer it was. He was really tall. I knew he was narrow, but he just was tall. Well, he turned, and I looked, and I could see his main beam. It almost looked bladed in a way. You could tell there was some good mass in the main beam, where like the 2 or the 3 kind of met. Yeah. I thought, all right, I'm shooting this deer. I'm going to do it. So I hadn't quite figured out just how far he was. So I opened the window of the banks blind, and I'm grabbing for my bow, and I'm grabbing for my rangefinder, and I'm trying to do all this at once. And
be quiet.
Yes, and still be quiet. Now, luckily, I had a great wind. The wind was blowing straight from him, straight to me at about, 8 mile an hour or so, just a good steady wind. So I wasn't worried about that. And then he seemed to be just dead focused back to where he come from in that draw. And I presume that he was wanting to make sure there was nothing else around, before he went back in there. He was going to run anything else off that was hanging around. But He was just a statue standing there. Like I said, perfect, quartered away. Just looked beautiful standing there. Again, this is on like 2.5 seconds, and I'm watching this. So I was able to get the window open, get my rangefinder. I had my rangefinder in the wrong hand. I'm left-handed. I had it in my right hand, so I'm trying to come across my body with the left eye, get it. My bow's over here, so I'm trying to grab my bow with my left hand and, multitask this, and I got the range on him at 44 yards. So it just so happened that 48 hours before this, we had recorded a podcast, and the talk of longer shots had come up because I had shot a doe there at 32 yards, and the shot was a little bit back. Now, granted, she only made it 40 yards, and she was dead. But we were talking about just how much stuff can happen when you get out there, 40, 45 yards. So many things can take place.
Yep.
The deer can drop, they can wheel. The wind can play more of a factor because you're losing a little bit more kinetic energy as that arrow goes out. Right. And we talked about those, and I said, I don't know that I would take a shot that far just from what I have seen. However,
didn't think twice, did you?
No. So
it just happened and you did it.
I'm going to admit that there is a part of the reason that this deer got shot at was because of the experience that I'd had that morning of getting picked out of the tree.
Right.
That's the deer that I wanted. But I thought, I've blown this, and I'm mad, and I may not see this deer again, and this deer looks pretty good, so I'm going to shoot him. And it felt right, so I had the range on him. I'm shooting a single-pin sight now, so I went and adjusted it between the 40 and the 50. Here's the other thing to this. When I practice, I did a lot of practicing this summer at 50 and 60 yards just to, get a little bit longer range practice.
Yeah.
But my standard just in-season shooting is 20, 30, 40,
Right.
And my groups at 40 are so much better than my 30-yard groups. I can't explain it. It's a single-pin sight. It's the same pin going up and down. But without doubt, every single group at 40 yards is better than what it is at 30 yards.
Really?
Don't know why. So I felt good.
That's a nice problem to have.
It is. And, I haven't shot at 45, but I've shot at 50 and 60. And I'm pretty hard on myself. I like to hit that little, 2-inch dot that you're shooting at. I like to put the arrows in that. Whereas, there's an 8-inch insert, and they're always all within that. And I got to realize that a big mature whitetail, if you can hit it in an 8-inch circle,
it's a pie plate.
Yeah, you're going to be doing all right.
Yeah.
If you can hit a 2-inch circle every time, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah. So that was going through my head as I knew that I had shot at 40. This deer just seemed to be in a different world. He was not paying attention to anything else. I think having a quartered away shot helped too. It looks like the target's a little bit bigger. You have a little bit more room for error at that point.
Right.
So again, these are all things that this whole thing probably happened in 10 seconds from the time that he went by to the time that he come back. It was no time flat. So I drew back on him, and that sight picture, it just seemed like it was a foot in diameter. I mean, I could just see everything perfect. That pin just floated right there, and I ended up shooting him a touch forward since he was quartered away. If he was broadside, I tucked it right in behind that shoulder.
Really? It
just felt good, and I was shooting lighted knocks, which I had never done before. But when I shot that doe, they weren't on there, and I never did find the arrow. Couldn't tell where the point of impact was, so I went and bought lighted knocks.
Did you find a lighted knock to be a little distracting?
No.
Really?
No. Of course, it doesn't activate until it releases. So,
right.
I will never shoot a piece of archery tackle again that doesn't have a lighted knock on it, period.
Yeah.
And so when I pulled back on him and I got settled in, it just felt good. And I am confident that if I had pulled back and it just didn't feel right, that I wouldn't have taken that shot. But it did. Everything lined up. It felt good. And so I let that release go, and I watched that lighted knock, and I watched it just tuck right in there behind that shoulder. And he took off, and I could see the lighted knock go with him, and it fell out about 15 yards later.
Really?
I heard some crashing going down through this draw, and then I heard a big crash, and it sounded like a dead branch breaking off of a tree, and then nothing. Well, then all of a sudden I seen a doe take off from where he had come from and run down that draw. Well, hindsight, it appears he was bedded in there with a doe. when I even got in there, when I walked into that stand, I must have walked right across that field, and he was in there and didn't see me. Of course, I was quiet and had the wind. But that's what he was doing, is he was protecting that doe that
he's focused.
He was locked down with.
Yeah.
So, I
but
don't.
that plays into you taking a shot too.
It does.
Yeah. If he's distracted, you can.
Yeah, it wasn't even like he was eating or anything. I mean, he was focused. He was not paying attention to anything else. He didn't drop. I mean, that arrow hit him, and then he took off. I mean, so it was the perfect conditions to take a 44-yard shot.
Yeah.
I felt really good about it. So after the shot, I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure what deer this was. What it was that I actually shot, to be honest with you. And so I sent Tyler a message and let him know that I had shot one, that it was a 44-yard shot, but I seen the arrow go in, and it was right in behind the shoulder, and it looked good, that I had heard some crashing, and then a brief pause, and then another crash, and then nothing else. But some other deer had taken off, and I wasn't sure who had left that draw and who hadn't.
Yeah. You weren't sure what went where. And
yeah.
you told me it had crashed. I thought, okay, dead deer, but then you said it got up and then more and then another crash. I'm like, well, I don't know, but it was kind of like, rather be safe than sorry. Might as well just stay put.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, too, I shot him at 5:02, and I believe the end of shooting light was like, I don't know, 2 hours later almost, an hour and a half later. Of course, this was the day before the time changed. Oh. So there was still plenty of hunting left, and it just so happened that I had already purchased a second either sex archery tag, because we had went down to Louis and hunted the 2 days before that. So I already had another buck tag in my pocket ready to go. Oh. So I said, well, I'm not going to get in a hurry. If he's dead, he's still going to be there. Yeah. So I just knocked up another arrow and just sat there and waited for Tyler to come. I told him when he gets there, get in the buggy and drive out, and either he's going to be there or he's not. So I waited, and it got dark, and I knew Tyler was on his way. So I decided to at least climb down and see if I could find blood or the arrow or something. And so I got down, and I went, and I've got one of these camera lights, and it's what you can put onto like a video camera or even just a regular picture camera. Photographers use it. It's just a real bright white LED light. Yeah. And it really lights up a swath, 20 feet by 20 feet. And I'm out there looking. Once again, not a drop of blood. Uh-oh. And I thought, well, this is not good. So as I'm walking up and down the field trying to find something, I look over and I could see my lighted knock inside the timber. So I just kind of snuck in. It was only in about 5 or 6 feet, but it was multi-floor rows, just real thick stuff. So I was trying to be quiet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
It's impossible. So I got the arrow and got back out, and I looked at it, and it had about 6 inches of the arrow busted off, but it had blood on it, probably another 8 or 10 inches up the shaft. Oh, wow. So I'm like, all right, this is a good sign. Yeah. The broadhead and part of the arrow is still in him, but I had deeper penetration, so I presumed that it went through, hit offside shoulder, maybe stopped it, broke the arrow off, something along those lines. So I was pretty confident that the deer was in that draw, but you still never know. Yeah. And I wasn't going to go in there and mess something up until Tyler got there, because if we screwed it up, I wanted it to be both of our faults and not just mine. So
you don't want him pointing a finger, right?
Exactly. So, and just a couple minutes later, he showed up.
He wanted to point the finger at me.
Yeah. He showed up, and then I kind of showed him where it went in and, the direction it went, and he kind of went down a little bit, and I was just going to follow the exact trail that the deer was taking, and Tyler picked up blood in there a little ways.
I just went down 20 yards, and then he kind of said where it went, and I thought, well, you're looking for blood right here. I'm just going to go down 20 yards and cut through I just basically went straight through the middle of it. I thought I'll walk through it, and if I pick up blood in the draw, I'll follow it. And if I don't, then we'll back out and go down and keep trying it. And I went in and just instantly found blood, and the minute you saw the blood, you're like, that's a dead deer. I mean, you could tell it was just blood everywhere, and it was good lung blood.
And I never did see it, because by the time I was fighting through all the thick stuff, he told me he was on blood. I'm trying to catch up. Well, then he found the deer. I mean, the deer only went 20, 30 yards.
Oh,
I mean,
it's all over.
Once he got in the woods there,
yeah,
just back into the draw, he didn't go far. But.
Yeah, he was stiff by the time we got there 2 hours after the shot. Yeah, very stiff. So, So then Tyler's like, well, are you excited? And,
well, you didn't seem overly excited.
No, and we've talked about this a little bit during turkey hunting. And I haven't figured out what it is. And I think, Walt, you and I kind of had a quick conversation about this at turkey camp last year. I don't know if that, with me being a cop, if part of that is I'm just used to these, having the adrenaline rushes and, the high peaks that I stay more level. I don't get real fired up. Yep. I'm happy.
You're assessing the whole situation.
Yeah. I've been trained to just keep an even keel, and not get too wound up about stuff. Yep. So I was very thankful, but I'm not one of these guys to jump and scream and shout and, but also I wasn't shaking real bad like when I shot. I mean, I just was able to keep it together, I guess. I didn't get too worked up. And I was the same way with my first deer, with my first turkey. And I don't know what it
goes back. You're shooting your bow on a regular basis, and you're practiced, and so you've actually trained yourself for that particular shot. And once it presents itself, you just kind of fall into the pattern.
And that's what I did too. I mean, it felt. I think part of it was because I had time. I didn't rush. I knew what I was doing. I had a perfect sight picture. It was in an open food plot. Didn't have to worry about finding a shooting lane or something like that. But so very thankful. And then we went through to try to figure out what deer it was, and then we finally figured out what deer it was, and that it had history with him. And he was a little bit bigger than what I had thought. I mean, Tyler.
That's a nice problem.
Yes, Tyler wasn't sure.
It was actually a neighbor that kind of pointed us to what deer it was.
Yeah, they
because we were kind of puzzled, like, what deer is this? And he Louis was with him and said three-way. And it was like, that is three-way, because you started looking at him. Remember the long G3 on him, and that was a dead giveaway for him.
So the neighbor had named that deer three-way. I had maybe conceitedly named it the Bowley Buck in 2016 because I had seen that darn deer so often that I just called it my deer.
Yeah, it's on your property.
I was
had your name on him.
I was seeing him all the time, and I truly thought I was going to get after him. So he had a couple different names, but that ultimately ended up being him. Not a huge bodied deer. But again, you look back at pictures from 15, 16, 17, and then now into 18. He peaked last year at 17. Which I believe was as a 6-year-old, and then I think now he's come down, and I just think he was an old 7-year-old deer. I mean, he was just not as big bodied as maybe he was at 4, 5, 6. Still a big deer, nonetheless. But yeah, so I was very thankful. Tyler put the tape to him later on, and he come out to 159 and 7/8.
That's good.
You'd have thought I could have found another 8 inch in there somewhere.
You would have thought, but my 2015 deer, Tyler is the one that measured that one as well, and he come up with 149 and 6/8 on that one. Oh, yeah. So I don't know if it's a coincidence or what, but
I think it's a guy measuring.
I'm good with math, so I keep a running tally in my head.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
if I'm getting close, I'll start shortening up on some 1/8 inches there.
So yeah, I've got one deer in the 140s and one deer in the 150s, I guess technically.
That's good.
But
it's a trophy no matter what.
It is. I was very thankful to get him to the taxidermist and get one more.
Get
on
the
the
full
wall.
body mount.
No. If that's the other thing too is our good friend Ryan Kirby. He keeps asking me what I'm going to do have an original commissioned. And originally I had told him, well, I shoot a 200-inch deer, then I'll do one. And I got thinking, man, I don't know how likely that is, so I may do like a 180. If I'm able to get a 180 on the ground, I may end up having an original oil painting done with it. We'll see what the story is.
Yeah.
But no, I'm going to do a nice pedestal mount. I put them in my basement, and I've only got 7-foot ceilings down there, so they look a little weird if they're on the wall.
Sure.
So
Tyler's got one on a pedestal. That's real good.
Yeah, so I found a pedestal idea. I got a place to put it. It doesn't come out very far, and you have the opportunity to mount 2 different deer. Oh. So I'm trying to think ahead. So I've got room for expansion, I guess.
You go.
So that's kind of the plan there.
Maybe your son gets a little bigger, he kills one.
Yes.
There you go. You got dads and sons.
The only thing about a pedestal mount is they do take up some real estate.
Well, the one that I had found just has a base that is probably 18 inches by 18 inches, 2 foot by 2 foot, and then it's just got a tree limb, coming up off of it that kind of forks off. So it doesn't stick out very far, and it won't take up too much space. And I've got a window in my basement that's just in front of the fireplace. It's kind of dead space. You can't really put a chair there. There was just nothing to put there, and I got to look, and I'm like, man, that would be a perfect place to put this. Yeah. So that's the plan for now, is to put that there.
You can always build on.
Yes, and actually the pedestal that I had built, or the display that I built for my 2015 deer, it's got a spot for 2 deer on it. But in 2013, I my first ever mature deer I ever seen in the woods, I shot and killed him with shotgun, and he's a little deer, and he's busted. One side's all busted off, but I still had him mounted.
Yep.
I had been shotgun hunting off and on for 10 years and had never seen a mature deer. And at the time, I was having problems finding a place to hunt. I didn't know if I was going to go another 10 years without seeing another deer that way. And I thought, you know what? You have to start somewhere.
That's right.
So I'm still proud of that deer. I look at it all the time. People say, why would you mount that? Well, it's my first one.
That's right. The first one's always special,
yes.
No matter what.
And
particularly when you do it all by yourself.
Yes. And I have the skull caps off of my very first buck, a little bitty forkhorn, shot in 2007, and I'll never forget the feeling on that. When you'd have thought I shot a booner. I mean, I was so happy.
Yep.
So I've got that one on a plaque, and then I've got the first buck that I shot on my farm in 2014 in gun season, a little 8.2-year-old. I got that as a skull cap. So I've got some sort of amount for every multi-antlered buck I ever shot. I mean, I've shot a couple button bucks and a little spike, I think, once. But other than that, I've got either the skull cap or a full mount of all those deer, and I'm proud of every last one of them. They all have a story.
You bet.
And we talk about on this podcast that it's not all about score. We're looking for...
It shouldn't be about score.
No, and we're looking for age deer. Us, me, Louie, and Tyler, that's kind of what we're looking for, is mature deer. But if there's a guy out there that he's just looking for a 3-year-old deer, as long as he's shooting a deer that makes him happy...
Yep.
Shoot what makes you happy.
You darn right. And that's what is most important in all this. Is
at the end of the day, we're all at different levels of maybe what makes us happy or what our goals are. Yeah, I mean, just the other morning I had a 3-year-old 8-point come by that was a 130-inch deer. I mean, just a nice solid 8. And if somebody would have shot him, I wouldn't have downgraded them at all. It was a nice deer, but he just wasn't what I was looking for. And especially when I've got 1 buck left for the season and I've still got this other deer I'm after. I mean, it's a short list of deer that I'm going to fill my second tag with. But you just got to do what you're proud of, and don't ever feel that you're not good enough, I guess, because your deer didn't score whatever. So there's too much of that going on, unfortunately,
I agree.
in the outdoors. So that was the story of my buck.
And the season's not over yet either.
No, it's not. It's, what is it, November 10th here. We've got a few days of the rut left, and then gun season coming up, and then second gun season, and then muzzleloader season, and I've got 2 acres of standing beans, and so plenty of opportunity yet to come. So
I hope you tag out this week, Mike.
Well, and I was thinking about that too. I'm thinking,
especially when it's really cold outside.
Yeah. He's got some good buddies that come out and hunt some
occupy those banks blinds. You
just keep the LP in there, and we'll hunt them.
Yeah. So. I'm looking forward to gun season, but part of me, I don't know, I'm torn. Do I want to tag out this week and not hunt gun season? Like Walt and I talked about off air, I got a brand new slug gun that I invested in pretty deeply, that I'm excited to shoot, but
I like your words, your terminology about, you invest.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I tell my wife.
Yes, too. It's an investment. It really is. And that's how I justify it to myself. So, but I'm not going to let a good deer walk by just because it's not quite gun season yet. If I see one that I'm going to be happy with, I'm going to shoot.
That's what you should do.
So, that's enough of me rambling on about my deer. What you guys been seeing down here in Missouri this past week?
Been seeing a lot of deer.
Today I shot all day.
As did I. Only difference between you and I is your set was 70 degrees and mine was
I had a
high of 28 and a low of 10. So,
and I saw deer all day long.
Yeah, they were up moving good today.
Yeah, they were.
A lot of younger bucks.
I had one decent buck. And like, the good thing about trail cams is it kind of gives you an inventory of what's on your property.
Yes.
And Tyler's been on me enough that don't shoot the little ones, that we've let enough of them walk over the years that it's starting to really pay off, I think. And I could have probably killed this one today and been 10 years ago, but instead I watched him for almost 40 minutes in my deer stand, watched him dog a doe around there, and watched him bed down, get back up, move around, lay back down, and so yeah, it was a good day in the blind.
So a little bit of rut activity yet. I mean,
oh yeah, I had some bucks just up, noon today. I had a little buck come through, just shows up behind me and just cruising. And I had several other deer throughout the day were doing the same thing, and a few of them that were bumping does. But I did notice a lot of fawns that were just kind of off by themselves.
Yeah, they were just kind of wandering around, kind of lost. Like,
it kind of gives me the indication that maybe we're in lockdown right now, where there's a lot of does getting bred. So I think maybe some of the more mature deer, or if they're not in with a doe right now, are out looking.
Yeah. So you might catch them traveling between the toes.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, this was opening day of your rifle season, but it wasn't quite the volley of shots that you typically would hear on an opening day.
It sounded like crickets this morning, but it was also maybe a whopping 10 degrees.
Yeah, I think the weather had a lot to do with it. They had snow on the ground, and it was crunchy this morning, and
there was no stealthiness getting in this morning.
No, you just get out and walk and go in there and get in. And
no, I think Louis sent us a message something about how loud it was, and I almost replied, "Yeah, I can hear you from Missouri."
Yeah,
It was nothing quiet. I bumped a couple deer going in this morning, and they could hear me, and I could hear them where they were going too. So I mean, it was no.
The good thing is I don't think they really knew what
was
going on.
Yeah.
It was a human. It was just noise.
Yeah, and I stayed in bed this morning. I didn't hunt.
You did.
I didn't have a good spot for it.
I think that the message this morning was that you didn't have an LP tank in your bank spline, Mike.
Well, that was a big part of that's.
I think that was 99.9% of the determining factor whether or not you were hunting this morning.
It's warm in bed.
I didn't have a spot.
I hunted daylight to dark, never left.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was cold.
How cold was it, Tyler?
It was cold. I'll just say that.
The one thing I will promise you is if it was opening day of Illinois shotgun season, I would not have been in bed.
Nope.
But I was not going to go out there with a bow and arrow that bundled up where I couldn't hardly move.
I don't blame you.
And I wasn't sure what the bow was going to do when it got that cold, I mean.
You wouldn't want to break it, would you?
Yeah, I don't want to break it. So it was nice to actually take a morning off. I had hunted, mornings and evenings for 3 days in a row, and that's kind of about my limit. I need to take a sit off after about 6 or so.
Yeah.
You just kind of clear my head a little bit and, kind of recharge. So that's what I did. I killed that deer Saturday, and then I didn't hunt Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. The weather wasn't the best Monday, Tuesday. It was raining a lot.
Right.
And I just killed a deer, so I wasn't as motivated. I probably would have went and sat in a blind if I hadn't have killed one yet. But again, I just needed to recharge a little bit. I'd hunted a lot leading up to last Saturday.
If your head's not into it, it's not a fun
that's
day.
That's a big thing, yep. So, I went back out Wednesday, back after this mule deer buck in his spot, and I had the right wind Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to hunt him in this one spot. And he hadn't been there since the Saturday before, I think it was, or even that Thursday before. It had been 7 or 8 days before he had been in that location. But the trail camera history that I had, going back to how important those things can be, is I knew he would show back up in this spot. There was no doubt about it. It's just a matter of time is if I can have the right wind to be there when that happens. So, again, Wednesday morning, night, Thursday morning, night, Friday morning, Friday night. I guess it would have been, what is today? Today's Saturday. So it would have been Friday morning. I'm sitting there. And here he comes about 20 minutes after daylight. I was a little late getting into the stand, overslept, slept right through my alarm, which is another reason why I think I slept in this morning is if I went to bed at a good time and had a good 8 hours sleep and I still slept through my alarm. I think I was just tired.
Yeah.
So, but I got out there, got into the stand, clean, didn't bump any deer. And sure enough, here he comes. And he was doing the same thing he had always done. But when he got close, there was two different things he would do. Sometimes he would come check a scrape a little bit closer to me, or sometimes he would check one about 10 yards the other way. Well, he chose to go to the one that was a little bit further away, kind of out in the open food plot area, and I'm in the timber. Well, he was walking along, and it was kind of thick, but I could see him, and then he just stopped. And it had to be right where my trail come in, right where I walked through this food plot, which I'd been taking that same path every time I had sat there. I sprayed my boots down with, scent-free stuff.
Right.
There was fresh snow on the ground that morning, which I wasn't sure if that was going to help or hinder the scent checking capabilities of a deer. I know that, like with beagles and stuff or rabbits, if it's real dry, they have a hard time getting on a trail, and if it's a little wetter, then they can get on one. So I wasn't sure what that was going to do. But either way, he got close, and he stopped. And I thought, uh-oh. And there was no shot opportunity. I mean, it was real thick. He was a little bit, he's probably 45 yards away through the timber. And I seen him lift up his leg and put it back down. He did it twice, his front right leg. Wasn't stomping, but he was just picking it up and slowly putting it back down. I thought, well, this isn't looking good.
No, not usually.
Yeah, so then he turns and goes to walk away and actually walk right back towards my other food plots. And I get a little wound up. And so I grab the old grunt call. And I give him a grunt, and he stops.
Really?
Turns his front end. I can see his front two legs kind of turn, and he's looking back. And I just sat there and quiet for a while, and he did that. He stood there for a few seconds, and then he went to take off again. Gave him another grunt. He stopped, looked back. Thought, getting his attention. So I just sat there. Well, then he goes to take off again. He's walking, not running, just walking away, walking the other way. Well, I thought, I'm going to throw you a snort wheeze. And I threw a snort wheeze. I didn't make it through the first note of that snort wheeze, and he bolted like a flash of lightning, and he was gone. I thought, so I'd sent the guys a message, and Tyler's like, well, why didn't you rattle at him? You've done everything else. So,
surprised you didn't throw a few yelps at him and a little coyote howl, see if he'd come back.
And honestly, in hindsight, he was spooked, and, I should have just let him go, especially when he's walking back to the center of my property where all my food plots and all that is. But I got wound up, and it's part of it.
Yeah, it's hunting.
But I learned a lesson. I learned a great lesson,
yep.
And I didn't mess anything up big, I don't think he knew what was going on, but I learned a good lesson from it that I'll carry going forward, so it wasn't for naught,
Right.
He probably made a mental note on that grunt and that snort wheeze, so next time he hears it, just to kind of chuckle and keep on.
Well, so yeah.
That's Mike Bowley.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's Mike snort wheezing at me again. He'll just kind of nod at you.
Now the deer are naming us.
Right?
Yeah, no kidding. So I since then, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And I was, again, down a little bit thinking, man, there's chance number 2 at this deer. How many times am I going to have a chance before he just packs up shop and, moves to the neighbors and, never seen again? So I thought, I've got to just be smart about what I'm doing here. I don't want to blow too many opportunities with gun season coming.
Right.
That's, like I said, that's the equalizer.
It's not like it's December 31st.
No. So, but I don't want to just stay at home for the next week. I still want to get out there. So I thought, I'm just going to hunt smart. And so tonight I went and set the small food plot where I had shot the last 2 times I'd sat there, I'd shot a deer. I'd shot my doe a couple weeks ago and that buck last week. And I thought, maybe I'll have a little more magic. Last Saturday I went and sat there and had no intentions on seeing a shooter buck and had one down. So anything can happen. It's the rut, mean, anything's possible. So that's where I sat tonight. Had a bunch of does come out in different waves. They weren't fawns. A couple of them may have been yearlings. I've got my resident doe that lives right there. She's got a double throat patch, and this is the 4th year that I've watched her come out there.
What's her name?
I was just thinking of that. Double throat patch.
No, come on. More unique.
Well,
how about Whitey?
No, so get this. So in my head, I'd been thinking about double throat patch. That's too long. I thought, Yeah, DT. And I thought, well, DT is that's like deep throat. So then I was just calling her deep throat to myself. So I don't know. That's what happens. You get me to try to start naming these deer, and it just ends up not good. But
probably not a good idea for Mike to name them.
Yeah. So last night she had come out all the way at the other end of the farm into one of the bean plots, and she had her 2 fawns with her. Well, then the night she comes out by her normal home, and she had this yearling doe with her, not these fawns. So I'm not sure what was going on there. It's obviously
and you notice today I noticed the 2 does that I thought were in heat were both not old does, and they weren't the yearlings. They were the kind of that in between ones,
Yeah.
So I don't know when they cycle.
Well, and they say, I mean, they will. Sometimes they may be a touch later than some of the others, but. So anyway, they're coming out. I had a single one come out first, and then I had it left, and then I had another 2 come out, and then they worked off and headed towards my big field where the standing beans are, and then I had 2 more that came out after that. So I had 5 does total that had come through the plot, and it's getting to be end of legal light, and it was actually about 6 minutes before legal light. And I look up, and coming from the power lines, which is where I'd been hunting this mule deer buck, where his spot was that I knew he was at, through the opening, the entrance through there, here comes this deer, and I see tall tines, and I thought, this might be him. And you can obviously tell right away that it's a good buck.
Right.
So the window's a little iced over, and so I get the binoculars on him, and I could tell his G2s, G3s are long, really long 2s and 3s. This mule deer buck has, flyers off of each G2, and I wasn't able to see them through the binoculars, but it's about 120 yards through a froggy, frosty window and a little bit of timber when he kept going through. So I just opened the window and got on him. He did turn his head once. I didn't see those flyers, but again, it was some distance. I have no other deer that I've ever had on camera that are somewhat close to that deer, and he came from his area. I mean, I'm 90% sure it was him coming back, and he never did come into this field. He went into the big field. I would have to presume that there was several deer out in those bean fields eating, in those bean plots. But I did. I thought, ooh, do I grunt at him? But then I thought, you know what? He just heard me grunt, the other day. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And even then, there's 6 minutes or whatever to legal light.
Should have rattled.
Yeah. So I was just happy to know that even if it wasn't him, it's a deer that's just as big as him.
Yeah, maybe replace the other one.
Yes, and he's on the farm.
Yeah.
So, I got that little bit more fire lit under me now, after you see a good one tonight. So I've got a good game plan going forward. I'm going right back to that spot that I was sitting at where I've seen him a few times.
Yep.
As long as I have the wind, I may change up my entry strategy. I may kind of go in through the timber. It's going to make a little ruckus because I don't have a path through there. But if I get in there early enough that even with this frozen snow, you're going to make noise even if you walk through the food plot.
Yeah, you'll be making it far enough away that he wouldn't make any damage.
Yeah,
to him
and
anyway,
I want to set it up so if he were to cross my trail where I come into my stand, that he would have already walked through a shooting lane. And, if it's a deer I'm not going to shoot and he gets my wind, I'm not as concerned at this point.
Right.
And then if it's this deer I'm after, by the time he gets to my scent trail, I'm going to already had my shot. So that's my theory going forward with him. So, yeah, I'm reinvigorated. I went ahead and took this whole week off vacation, and I'm going to be doing some hunting and getting ready for gun season. So that's where we're at. I don't know where the rut's at on my place. I mean, they come in early. I think we had some lockdown earlier this week, but then yesterday morning I did see a little bit of cruising action going on with nice 3-year-old deer, some younger bucks coming by. Not a lot of chasing necessarily, but still some cruising. So I think we've went through maybe one round of lockdown. We may be getting close to another, and but I still think there's still some time left for sure.
Yeah.
So
another week. Put the hours in the stand, and it'll work for you.
Yep. So that's where we're at. In Illinois. So I think what we need to do is we need to talk to Walter here. And I mean, he's our guest of honor this week, and I've got some things that I want to talk to you about that I think could draw a different perspective to hunting, where it's come from, where it is today. So you grew up here in northeast Missouri.
I did.
We're in Clark County here, right?
That's correct.
And you grew up in Scotland County?
No, Shelby.
Shelby County. Shelby County.
Shelby County, down around Bethel, Missouri.
Bethel, Missouri. Okay. And I presume that you hunted as a kid and.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of got into the hunting side of it when my dad was a World War II vet.
Okay.
In 1962 or 63, we burned wood heat, and he had a tree fall on him and broke his leg, and he ended up having his leg amputated. So my hunting with Dad was kind of limited to whatever he could physically do.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an amputee above the leg. And I remember my first deer hunt with him. I was born in 55, so I think I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And you got to Dad told me stories about deer hunting in Missouri back then, that it was not common to see deer. And I think he told me one story where him and the neighbor had hunted a deer with a .22 rifle, and it was kind of like almost a whole day event to get this deer killed. But I was young enough, I don't remember the whole story. But the second one, the first one I ever went with Dad with, he had we killed a nice buck for back then. But Dad hunted from a car. And, of course, this is back before and everybody talked about handicap and whether you could do that or not. We just did it. And Dad smoked Lucky Strike cigarettes. And we had this Galaxy 500 car, and we was on a neighbor's farm. And it was a nice enough day, morning. And we'd pulled back into the pasture on the hillside, and I could still see Dad having the door open on the driver's side and him standing out smoking this cigarette. And the radio was turned on softly in there, and I'm a young kid sitting in the other one. And he has a 30-30 lever action rifle there, Model 94, same one I shot with. And this buck comes walking up the bottom of a ditch, not real far down, but probably a 60, 70-yard shot. And he shoots and kills it. And Dad being handicapped, he couldn't go down the hill, and another neighbor was in the area, and of course no cell phones back then. The neighbor just happened to be hunting the same piece of property, and he came walking up there and helped Dad and I get that buck into the back of the trunk. And I don't even know if we gutted it, but I was just a young kid. But that buck is still on my wall at home, and I took it to school and made a walnut plaque when I got old enough to do that. And that buck was probably an 8-pointer maybe, and I don't know. You've seen the rack, Tyler. What's it measure? I don't know. It's small.
A lot.
I call it almost a basket rack nowadays to compare to anything. But back then, in that part of Shelby County, that was a trophy. We took it home and hung it up in the meat room there in the house, and we had neighbors come around to see the rack, and so it was kind of a conversation piece, kind of a big deal, if you will. Nowadays, we would all laugh at seeing it here.
So back then, how was deer season? Were there tags or?
Oh gosh,
of course, even if there were things where it was just a different world back then.
Oh, I mean, Dad, we farmed. We had 700 and some odd acres, and I think they had a farm tag. So you had to write your name down on a piece of cardboard, put a string around it, and that was a farm tag.
That simple, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know of a lot of people too that back then, they even in Illinois would go out with a 30-30 or something. If they needed meat in the freezer, they would just walk out and find the deer and shoot it. And I'm sure it wasn't illegal, but back in the 60s and 50s, you did what you had to do to survive.
That's right. You did.
Just a different world. But so you were what, about 9 or so when that happened?
9 or 10.
Mid 60s.
Then I got involved with archery and killed my first deer with a Ben Pearson bow. I still have that bow. I think it pulls 42 pounds, if I recall.
Oh, wow.
Recurve?
Yeah, recurve. That's an old recurve. And sat on top of a brush pile and killed a doe. And there was a radio contest. KHMO radio had a send in your deer information. So we took it to the locker, and I think it weighed 126 pounds. And I ended up winning a quiver for my bow, and I thought I was hot stuff back then. I'd really done something, but it wasn't a very big deer. And of course, back then we didn't have four-wheelers or or side-by-sides, anything like that. I had a 50 John Deere tractor that I was old enough to drive, and that was my four-wheeler. And it was down a dirt road, and at the other end of the dirt road, my sister and her husband lived. So when I killed that doe that morning, I on down the road to my sister's house, got them out of bed and needed help. So Richard came up and helped me load that doe in the front of on the hood of Dad's 50 John Deere tractor, and we strapped it on, and then I drove it back home that way. I think we still got a picture of that somewhere.
So about how old were you when that happened?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I got into deer hunting after, I don't know, I was probably 12 or 13. Well, I didn't have a car because obviously I was driving the 50 John Deere. That was my four-wheeler. So.
Wow. I guess I didn't realize there was many people archery hunting, at that time.
Well, I ordered that bow out of, if I recall, Dad got the magazine at the MFA store from Gander Mountain, I believe. And, back then you had to lay it out and make out the order form with a pencil or pen, and then you sent it in through the mail, and then you waited. And, so the anticipation is always building the whole time for what was going to come in the mail.
Wow.
Mom used to order my clothes through Sears and Roebuck, same way,
So did you just teach yourself how to shoot archery?
Yeah. You know what that arm guard is for? Yeah.
I learned.
I got a red arm several times from that. And you learn quick.
I'm all self-taught as well.
Yeah.
And I learned about, turning that elbow in, making sure that elbow's out, and a few shots like that, and you'll have a nice.
Of course, during this time when I was getting into the archery side of it, Fred Bear was a big discussion. I know when I bought my broadheads, I had the Fred Bear broadheads, I believe, with the little inserts in them, and I think I may still have a couple of them in the drawer downstairs in the gun room.
Wow!
I don't throw anything away, But you guys are sitting here talking about trail cams and naming these deer and knowing what you have. We didn't have trail cams back then. All we had was tracks in the road or tracks in the bottom of the ditch. And you'd look at those tracks and, you'd think, gosh, that's a huge deer. Look at the size of that. Look at the dew claws on it.
Yep.
And I don't hear you guys talk about that now.
No. And that's the one thing that I, in particular, am very lacking. My woodsmanship skills are non-existent. Everything that I know about hunting in the outdoors, I've taught myself. I mean, I didn't have anybody to teach me growing up, never had a dad. Nobody in my family hunted. So I've really learned these last 4 or 5 years with a ton of YouTube videos and reading, stuff on forums and guys like Tyler to give me some advice and, guidance and stuff like that. But then just getting out and doing it, some trial and error. Yeah. And that's one thing that I wish I was better about is my woodsmanship skills. And I try to get better now. When I walk in or out to the stand, I'm looking for tracks. I don't care if it's fawn tracks, doe tracks. I'm trying to figure out what direction they're going, how fresh they are. Yeah. If maybe they're in one of my old boot tracks. I mean, just these little things like that I think is gone today. I like the technology. I love naming my deer. I mean, I run 11 trail cameras on 35 acres of land. So I love that. It's a hobby of mine.
Right.
But sometimes I think it would have been a different experience back then to just.
But see, I was big into Outdoor Life, the magazine. Mm-hmm. And I think Mom had a subscription to it. And I would sit and read that, go to bed at night, and I would lay in bed and I'd read the Outdoor Life. And I remember one guy talking in Outdoor Life, I was saying this today when I was watching these deer in the wood, about the woods is full of vertical lines.
Uh-huh.
And he was saying, watch for the horizontal lines.
I do that. I remember that. I thought about that today because I was looking through the woods. You taught me that as a young kid, as when you're looking through the woods, vertical lines are normal, horizontal lines are not. And I'm looking through and something caught my eye, and it was the midsection of a deer.
Yeah.
The back end was covered by a tree, the front end and the head was covered by a tree, but I could see the body in there. And I looked at that, what's that? And I pull up and look, and it's a deer. It's 100 yards off through the woods. But I caught that. It just stuck out to me.
Wow.
So my dad wasn't one that, when he was in the military, he always talked about he got all the camping he ever wanted to do when he was in the military, so he had no desire to do it after that. But he had no objections to me hunting, or in fact, he encouraged it. In fact, the rifle I was hunting with today, I got in 1973, I believe, a Winchester Model 70 243, and it was pride and joy. We kept it underneath the couch. So company would come, and Dad'd say, show them the gun. And invariably, they'd be sitting at the couch. So you move your legs a minute, and I'd pull out that gun and show them my 243. And I'm sure our whoever I was showing it to was probably looking at, this kid has that? You know? Well, I still got my first gun.
You know, and I can see where your dad would come from, that he probably didn't have a desire to go out there, but at least he still allowed or encouraged you to have that opportunity. And
but we did deer hunt. I mean,
that was something you would still do together.
That's something we still do today. That's the reason opening day is so important to me with Tyler and my grandson, is that Dad always got up, and Mom was big on doing opening morning.
Yeah.
We had breakfast. I remember one year I think we got up at 3:00 in the morning. My calculations was so we could have everything done. Dad we'd have breakfast, and we had to have our coffee. Dad had his office call. He always called every morning. And then you'd have to help Dad get dressed by getting his shoes on his peg leg, is what he called it. And then I go out to the shed and get the 50 John Deere out, and it had a heat houser on it. And that's what we went to the woods with. And I remember Dad shooting a doe from that tractor one morning. We was up by the windmill. And I don't know how he saw it, but it turned out to be a fawn. And that's another story about Dad. But this small doe was standing out in the middle of the bean field, and Dad was still in the pasture with this, and I'm riding on the fender part of the 50 John Deere, and Dad reaches down and flicks that switch off and pulls the clutch back on it and grabbed the rifle, and the heat houser has a plastic windshield above it, and he laid that over the top of that, and that deer was looking straight at us, and he hit that thing right in the middle of the neck, just whacked it and right over the. So I always thought Dad was a heck of a shot,
right?
And he was a good shot. So, but he's always a good sport about deer hunting. He knew that I liked it, and even after I got married, I know when I got out of Police Training Institute in November, I started. It was 6 weeks back then, and we got out of. I think I graduated on a Friday afternoon, got in the truck and run to Shelby County as fast as we could get there. And I think I bought an out-of-state tag, and at that time I think it was like $35 or something for an out-of-state Missouri tag. And I was there but for opening morning, Saturday morning. You know, you didn't miss that.
Wow.
You can miss the other parts of the week, but you didn't miss Saturday morning.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to me now.
You know, and that's why I told Tyler I wanted to come down here on opening day, or at least opening day eve, just because I know that it's got to mean a lot. It's tradition. And, me growing up, I never had that chance, but I've seen everybody else get to do it and always wanted to. So that's part of the reason why I look forward to Illinois gun season, and I'm thankful to get to go to a deer camp of a few guys that we get together every year and hang out. And
well, you start by building traditions by just doing it.
Yes.
Dad, they left the farm in 1990, and that was his last year to hunt the deer. Him and Mom went to a senior housing, and I went home and hunted with him and I had already bought this place on this side of the road at that particular time, and he hunted from the truck still, and by that time we're getting permits to do it,
right?
So he was doing it correctly, but he shot a really nice buck from the truck. Of course, he couldn't go out and track it, so I was down the ditch. I come up the ditch, and what'd you do, Dad? Well, I shot, and he was excited.
Yeah.
I shot a good one. Okay, well, where's he at? I don't know. He run off. So I go down. Of course, I have my rifle. I go down, walk through the woods, and I track this buck, and I ended up probably tracking him 100 yards or so, and he was still alive, and I finished him off for Dad. Of course, my sisters always accused me of shooting the deer for Dad and then having it mounted, and that was not the way it happened at all. Dad shot that deer fair and square.
Right.
And we had it mounted, and it was the biggest buck he'd ever killed. He'd always killed fawns, it seeed like, over all of the years.
Bambi.
We always kidding him about that. And, of course, my dad couldn't gut a deer without going, kind of like Tyler does.
Hey, happens to some of us.
Yeah.
But I think Dad probably played that up some, too, so I'd do it for him.
Probably.
Yeah.
Wow. So where is that mount at today?
It's in my gun room.
It is.
Downstairs.
It is.
Yeah, it's still good. I ought to bring it over here at some point.
Yes. I think that's where it should be, is here at camp. And
So after we got in 1990, when Dad and them went on to sell the farm, we'd already bought this place, and then Tyler was coming along at that time too.
I'd already come along.
Right.
At that time.
Growing up a little.
Yeah, I was getting older.
Yeah. But our first deer season here was in the camper, and I remember having it just 100 yards away from where the camper was parked.
There's a picture on the wall over there.
Is there?
Yeah. up in that tree, just right over here on the edge of the field.
Yeah. We put it there because Tyler was so small that I didn't figure he'd be able to set for that long. And it was close enough that I could send him back to the camper and watch him and still be able to stay on the stand so he could go back and be with Mom. So that's how we ended up here.
So you would have been what, 6, 7?
1990, I've been 6.
Wow. Do you remember that at all? Do you remember that early?
I remember that stand over there vaguely, more so than the picture kind of brings back the memory of it. But that's just about. I remember going there. Probably the hunt that probably stands out to me most as a kid was one that we were back here. I don't know if that was bow season or gun season. I think we'd hung like 2 deer stands and trees that were side by side, maybe.
We did.
And
one ladder and 2 stands, 2 trees. They were that close.
Okay, yeah, they were right by one another there. But we went back and hunted. Was that gun season or I think it was gun season?
I think it was.
Yeah, I don't think it was. Was it opening morning?
I think so.
We went back here and it just started snowing.
It was so quiet that morning.
It was peaceful. You could hear. Nothing made a peep. But just every 15 minutes, you kick an inch of snow off your stand, and
we didn't see any deer. But
no, we didn't see one deer the whole morning.
It was a snowfall. It was so memorable to me, anyway.
It probably snowed 6 inches that morning.
It seemed like it.
So, what was the story you were telling one of our other episodes about your tree stand safety of the old fallen oak tree or something?
Oh, well, that's kind of where the bank spline is now. Where Dad used to take me across the road. There was an old fallen down oak tree that was just right where I could sit below him, and he could sit up behind me. And that's where he'd take me and we'd go bow hunting. And that was before I even bow hunted. That was just
you don't have to tell that whole story.
He'd take me along. Was that the 5 shots?
Yeah.
Well,
we shot at that deer. We never did kill it.
Well, and he
kept coming back too.
Yeah, he wouldn't run away either. So.
He talked about that, and I told him I don't believe that Walt Sellens would ever shoot at a deer 5 times and not hit it.
Yeah, a deer was a deer back then. It was probably a little basket rack 6 or 8 point. I don't think it was a monster.
Yeah, but part of that's being a dad, Tyler. You wanted, I wanted to kill something with you along, so you got the experience of it too.
And I'm already having those thoughts, and we talked about that on one of our other episodes. I wanted to take my son out when there was a chance to see deer for one. But also when there was a chance I thought I would take even a doe or something because I want him to have that feeling of success or, what goes in it, what the harvest is like. He understands that, the buck I shot last week, he went out and took pictures of it, loved it. My daughter was a little leery at first, but my son was just up rubbing him, saying how soft he was and stuff like that. But I want him to see the rest of the process as well. Sure. But I want him to get kind of hooked early.
You bet.
And, I know these days we'd probably make it too easy on kids, bringing, some toys maybe or some food and stuff like that. But
I didn't have any of that when I was a kid.
No, and a lot didn't. But
no, we had to pack it in,
but I'm going to do what I have to do to get him out there, and we'll start weaning that stuff off, I guess, but I want him to have positive experiences and enjoy his time out there. So the first one will be a little nervous to see, how he does, but I may even get him out here this fall in a blind with some heat.
Yep.
We'll kind of see how it goes.
Yeah,
but
don't miss that opportunity.
No, I don't want to, and my son loves nothing more than to hang out with me the other night. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday night. I had to go to the bow shop up in Salem, Iowa to get some new arrows. And his mom had said something to him about, I might not be there because I had to go to the bow shop. And they got home, and I was still there. Well, he wants to go to the bow shop with me.
Oh.
So
come on,
I told him, I said, let's go. And my wife's like, well, what about, me and your daughter? I said, well, you're not going to enjoy sitting at the bow shop and shooting. I said, so me and him will do it. I needed to go to the farm store to get some stuff. Yeah. So we piled up and we took off up there. It's about an hour drive, and we got up there, and he did really well. I went around, showed him some of the mounts they had, and picked out a bow for him. I got an idea of a bow to get for him for his birthday next spring. And then, so then we left and got back and went to the farm store, and then we went to supper together and just enjoyed it. And my son is just a very sweet kid. He's sweethearted. We'd go down the road, and he'd say, Daddy? And I'm like, what? I love you. And I'm thinking, man, and he means it. It's just such a good boy. We don't get a chance to spend a lot of time together, just him and I, without his sister or his mom being there.
Right.
And me growing up and not having a dad, I cherish even those little things like that.
You bet.
So
You should.
And he loves nothing more than to be hanging out with me, and I can't wait to get him in the field and start teaching him a few things. And that's why I'm really trying to cram as much stuff as I can, experience and knowledge, so I have the ability to pass it on.
Expose him to everything you can at this age.
Yeah, and he loves it. He loves the outdoors. He loves just being outside, and so I'm very, very thankful for that. So now you're a grandfather.
Yeah.
And Spencer is getting to about that age where he's going to be going out more and more.
I think I need to buy him a gun.
Well,
might be a little early, but
that's never too early.
That's been the discussion at my house. I'm probably going to start with the old Red Ryder, and then the 22 long rifle, and kind of go from there. And I've already got the 22 long rifle. I'm going to pass on to him. That was my excuse for buying the 17 HMR.
See, my first gun that my dad got me was for Christmas. And it was a used, he got it down at Merkel's in Quincy at that time. It was a used CO2 pellet gun.
Oh, wow.
And so they wrapped it up, and I remember how they wrapped it, because we were basically poor back then.
Right.
They wrapped it up in a rug.
Yep.
And put it behind the Christmas tree. And when you first looked at it, you didn't even think it was another gift. It was just Mom's old rug back there. And then so you just got get that rug out. Oh, okay. So unroll that rug, and here's this CO2 rifle. And so we fired it up, punctured the CO2, and put a pellet in it. And I went out bird hunting around the pond. And I know I got out there, and I think I shot it once or twice, and I was out of gas.
Oh, no.
Turned out it was not a very good gun. So we loaded back up and went back down to Keller's and bought I think it was a Sheridan pump up. You could pump it up 8 times, pellet rifle, and a little lead, and it was just accurate. It's all get out. And then we didn't have it very long, and I traded it off and got my first 22 rifle. So all within a year. And so I was glad that we progressed. And
rather quickly.
That particular 22 rifle was a Remington Speedmaster 5.52. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I don't know.
But Dad had an old...
is that the one Dale has?
Yeah. So Dad and I, before he left the farm, we got to doing a little horse trade, and I said, well, I like your old rifle better than I like mine. Well, I'll just trade you. Well, I'll sure. Dad's was an old and had wood stock and went all the way up the barrel, made by Mossberg, I believe. But it was a 22 bolt action.
Oh,
and,
wow.
It was just, you could hit eyeballs and sparrows at 100 yards, it felt like, But so I ended up with that, and then my nephew ended up with my old gun that I had traded Dad, so then he still has it. So
oh, good. So at least you know where it's at, anyways.
Yeah, I'm glad that he's got it, and it's a piece of history.
Yeah,
down.
Huh, that's great. So, that's what I'm trying to figure out is how we're going to do this progression of the firearm thing. But I'll figure it out, I guess.
Yeah.
So we'll start him young. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Start him young.
Get him involved.
But my kid, he's a smart boy, and I think, he's getting to that point where he's ready and he can take instruction and comprehend safety and stuff like that.
Yep.
So, are you going to be taking Spencer out at some point, you think? You and
I don't know. I hope so, aren't we?
Yeah, we took him last year.
We did, didn't we?
We took him out Christmas Eve, Dad's birthday, and
Tyler and I've kind of done that over the years. Kind of
we went and sat in the banks blind, and Spencer went with us, and Dad took some oranges with us, some little small oranges to eat, and I'd taken Spencer out earlier this year, and he's the one that brought it up. He said something about, remember that time we went hunting with Grandpa? And I said, yeah. And I said, you remember what we ate? And he kind of stopped for a minute, thought, and he goes, oranges. So it obviously stuck out in his mind and remembered that, and he's taken a liking to it. I mean, he's understanding more this year the concept of we don't just go out and shoot a deer, that we're going out and hunting. They have to be close enough, and more of that concept of it. So he's really taken a liking to it so far. So I hope we can at some point here get out and do some more hunting with him. So
yeah, it'll be fun to see him get his first deer. I got pictures of you with. I think the rifle's bigger than you were.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Wow.
Close to it.
And like you said, they grow up fast, and you only get to have a first once. So
right.
Cherish it, enjoy it,
You
and
bet.
my big thing is just positive experience. Let them enjoy it. If we don't pass it on to these next, generations of kids and stuff, I mean, the art of hunting will just be gone. I mean, we talked about a little bit ago, just the woodsmanship being almost non-existent. I mean, that will come to the art of hunting.
Right. And you can't do that with a video game either.
No.
Video games have their right place, but
and I'm not a big fan of them. I never got into the video games, but I just think the opportunity to get outdoors and to see everything. I mean, I'm 35 years old and I'm still learning about what different types of birds are and plants and all this stuff that I just didn't know. I never had the opportunity to know. But it can be very rewarding once you start figuring out what some of these things are and how they progress, or some of the birds that migrate through and
sure.
Stuff like that. So I want to try to pass that on to my son, and he may end up not taking to it. Maybe it ends up being something he doesn't want to do. Not going to force him to do it. I'm not going to let him just not go because he wants to sleep in. But if he gets to the point where he's just not into it, I'm not going to force him to do it. Maybe my daughter will be into it. I don't know. Maybe they both will. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but I want to give them the opportunity. And let them kind of make their own decision on if it's something they want to do or not. And the way I look at it is if neither one of them do, that's more deer for me to go after, I guess, But
hunting is more than just going after the animal. It's watching the sunrise, watching the sunset.
And it has to be, because very rarely is it successful.
Being out there when the storms come through, when seeing a snowfall like Tyler and I just talked about, that's all part of the experience of being in the outdoors and part of hunting.
And just to see the change of the timber, and I went to that stand the other day, and I hadn't been there in a few days, and a lot more of the leaves had fallen. Yeah. You look through and you can see so much more, but certain leaves were still holding on, and just to watch that progression from October 1st here till November 10th, just to see how things change. Yeah. And you can't get that from the city or from a textbook or anything like that. I mean, you just got to go out there and sit and listen. The other morning I was sitting there and heard some turkeys fly down, heard the fly down cackle from them. Yep. And then they were doing a little bit of yelping. Yep. And just listened to it all morning long, just stuff like that I think everybody should experience that.
Well, even a smell. I mean, it's like the smell of fresh cut grass. There's the smell of fall in the air is different than what it is in the springtime. And you talk about fresh earth. I know that's one of the scents we use for cover scent, but there really is a smell out there that you can associate with different parts of
and just the cold air. When that cold air comes through, it just kind of puts a different perspective on the smells that are already out there and whatnot. So
that's just because it changes your glands there for smelling, Mike, when it's really, really cold. Of course, you're probably in the blind.
Yeah, it's about 74 degrees.
We're going to 74 degrees.
How cold he was today.
14 degrees.
How cold was it, Tyler?
It was cold.
Yeah, I sent him a...
And how did you stay warm?
Hey, I got me some new Sitka this year, and it works.
It's good stuff.
He's happy with that Sitka gear.
I'm not going to complain by any means.
It's good.
That's staying warm. That's always the number one thing.
That's always been my biggest problem. Year after year was always staying warm, and I always felt like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man of having way too many layers on that you couldn't hardly function. And now I feel like I leave the house and I don't have a whole lot of clothes on, but I go out and I stay warm. And I mean, it's
technology.
It's worth the investment.
How things change. So, well, Walt, again, I appreciate you giving us a little bit of history of hunting and what it was like back then. And I guess I didn't get into it much, but Walt kind of mentioned he was in the police academy. He's a retired chief of police in one of our neighboring towns, and a role model of mine, and one to look up to as an aspiring young cop. I never had the opportunity to get to work for you, but I definitely learned a lot of things from you. Now that I'm a chief of police as well.
You're doing quite well.
Yeah, well, the bar has been set high. There's no doubt about that. But I guess I knew you before I knew Tyler. We told that story as well about after I bought my farm, and you'd said that I should get a hold of Tyler, and so that's how I did, and that's kind of how that friendship got started was
good.
through you.
That's
so,
good.
But I've always respected you and your work, and the more I get to know you and your family, you always welcome me like I'm one of one of your own.
Well,
so
I want you back here.
Yes,
keep coming.
And I enjoyed. We come down here for turkey camp every year, which we will come back and record an episode this April. I mean, that's one of my favorite times of the year.
Mine too.
Part of it's because of the fried bread, but just some of the
Bill Gowdy here.
Yeah, we'll get Bill Gowdy on.
We definitely
hopefully.
have good food. So
that's the main thing. So
we have food anyway.
So this was day one of your guys' rifle season. How long does it go?
10 days.
10 days.
Yeah, goes to the 20th.
So what's your guys' plan for Illinois gun season?
I'm not hunting Illinois. I didn't get a tag this year.
You didn't?
I forgot about doing that.
Oh,
you
no.
didn't get a tag for Illinois?
Somebody didn't remind me to send it in.
Well, hey, you're getting older,
I'm
Dad.
over 21, right?
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
I'll probably be hunting Illinois.
You're going to hunt Illinois?
Yeah, I've got. I'll probably hunt here tomorrow morning, and I got some work obligations here for the next few days, and I may slip back down here on, I don't know, Tuesday. Probably Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe sometime in there, and then
I got to work on Tuesday, but otherwise I'm off for the whole duration.
So you're going to still get some seat time in down here at camp? And
boy, I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to get some seat time in. I'm not sure I can do them all-day things. I didn't take any water, any food with me today, and so I'm going to have to change that.
Yeah, and pack some rations for sure.
Normally when you go for all day, you've got a thermos of coffee and a thermos of some warm food.
Yep. All the essentials.
So if you'll plan accordingly, you'll be fine the rest of this week.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So,
and by the way, I do like that chair.
You should.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
I need another one. One of mine has it and one of them doesn't. We're talking about the Banks blind chair that they offer.
It reclines.
Captain's chair.
I don't know what it is. It looks like a standard office chair, but it feels nothing like any office chair I've ever sat in.
I agree.
The arms go back.
Yep.
That's key, I think, especially if you're in an archery situation.
Of course, I've shot 2 deer out of it. And out of that chair, neither one did I fold the arms back on.
Well, there you go.
Yep. So, I mean, I didn't think about it, and the way I turned, they just weren't in the way. But that option is there if you need it. But they're just comfortable.
There is one thing I did notice about it. It would help if your Banks blind is level.
Oh, yeah. Otherwise, you'll roll a little bit.
I thought that was
no, it's not the roll. It's when you lean back in that chair.
Oh, it gets a little too much
if
top
you're in
heavy.
The downhill side, I haven't tipped it over yet, but I certainly
come
think
awfully
about
close.
It.
Yeah.
So I think I'll level the blind.
Was that in your nap or when was that?
No.
No,
I don't take naps.
Yeah.
Very often.
The very first year you had that blind, I believe you hunted the first 5 days of rifle season in Missouri, daylight to dark.
And I have never done that. I mean, spend that much time in the woods. I haven't done it.
It's a different world, though, in those things.
Of course, you took coffee and food.
Yeah. The only thing I don't like about them is you can't
hear.
You can't hear.
Yep.
So you miss those squirrels that are raising heck and or the crows Squirrelland. Yeah. You don't hear all of that other stuff that's going on. So you got to be aware of that.
And that would be my only downfall. But I'll try to open a window.
So do I.
You got to be careful with the wind. But if I feel that the wind is right and the odds are small that something may get downwind of me, I open that window to get some of that fresh air. Even tonight when it was cold and I didn't have a heater, I still opened that window to get some of that cold air blowing in my face just to feel it a little bit.
There is a certain aspect with a box blind that you lose over just a standard lock on or ladder stand.
Mm-hmm.
You have that there's always those blind spots and then just the sounds that you hear in the woods.
Yeah.
And
you get to 360 and be able to.
But I just feel so comfortable in one. I'm a large guy, and you get me in a tree stand, it's hard for me to hide. I don't feel that I can relax as much. I mean, in that blind, I've got stuff kind of laid out where it needs to be. And
wait as you get older, you worry more about falling and how high up that is and how hard it's going to. I've never fell out of a tree stand yet, and I hope I never do, but that is one of my concerns.
And mine as well, and that's why I only hunt ladder stands that I feel is a little bit safer. I can always have 3 points of contact onto that.
Yep.
I think I would have more success and probably get busted less from a tree if I was hunting a hang-on with just some sticks that stuck to the tree instead of that big old ladder. You could get higher, but I just don't feel comfortable with it, and I'm not going to put myself in a situation that I don't feel good about. It's not worth it for a deer.
Yeah, I know this is probably a topic for a different time, but Bill, my buddy Bill, that I used to hunt with all the time, he's passed now, but he was notorious. He could climb a tree and get 6-8 feet off the ground and stand on a limb, and his wall would tell you what kind of a success he had. He didn't rely. He'd take a really small stand, something he could pack a mile. Everything was a mile for Bill, it seemed like, but he could pack it for a ways and put it up and bring it back out with him the same night. And I think a lot of his success was the fact that he changed stands often.
They say the first sit in the stand is the best opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, he carried in, hop up, and he's liable to kill a buck.
Yeah, and he was a heck of an outdoorsman too. All the way around from squirrel hunting, to fishing.
Just don't hold the squirrel while he's using a knife.
Well, I had heard that. But
if you take your time when you were skinning squirrels, you get 1 or 2 done. Bill, he just go ahead and finish them up for you.
He had dressed them.
Split.
Yeah, he was good at it.
So there is something to that. There's a lot of public land guys these days that are walking in and getting kind of aggressive, but they're packing their stands and on their backs, sitting in a tree. They may blow some deer out, but they feel that's their best shot. But then the next time they're setting up somewhere else. So there's something to that, and that is a downfall to me. Just having ladder stands, they're not very mobile. I need help to get them up and to get them moved. So I'm kind of stuck, So
there's a certain aspect that I think that we try to pattern deer. And I think at the same time is, the deer are patterning us if we're consistently going to that stand.
Without a doubt.
I mean, they pick up on those sorts of things just like we pick up on what they're doing. I mean, they're not. I mean, they're.
They don't have trail cams, though.
No. They don't have, documentary pictures of us all the time when we're coming in and going out. But
and that's something with myself that I've really worked hard on this year is my entry and exit, getting in, getting out, without bumping any more deer than you had to.
Right.
And I think that plays a large key in it. And then also just hunting the wind. And I've got 2 stands and 2 blinds, and they all kind of have a favorable wind that is better than the other one. So if I don't know where to go, the wind can kind of tell me, well, this is your best spot, or at least cut it in half.
Right.
Gives me 2 different options, which helps me sometimes. And just like tonight, I seen that deer that I thought, that mule deer that I thought may be a shooter, and he come from a spot that I had been sitting, and some guys would have been mad, well, I wasn't there. Well, I didn't have the wind for that spot. So I was sitting the next best spot, which was a good spot for this south wind that I had, and I was still able to see him, but I didn't feel bad because if I would have hunted that stand, he probably would have busted me anyway.
Yeah,
so
you might not even see him.
Yep. So it's I think if you're going to, set up locations where you can hunt about any wind, because you can't bank on a north wind or a northwest wind. I mean, you're liable to have 3 days of east winds. You just never know.
Right.
So try to give yourself at least a chance to get out there. And that's the one thing I feel, even though I only have 4 spots to go, regardless of the wind, I have a spot that I can get out and hunt.
You got opportunity.
And sometimes that's all you have to do is just get out there and hunt.
That's
so,
right.
So I think that's going to wrap it up. Anybody have any final thoughts or anything that you want to get to before we get out of here?
Tree stand safety. Make sure you use those harnesses.
Yes.
I've got grandkids. I've got a kid. You got kids.
Yep.
You got to be there for them.
That's right.
Buckle up.
And
sound like cop, don't we?
We do. We sound like cops, but there's something to it. I mean, they're affordable. They're not. I used to not wear one until I had kids, and then I went and bought one. I'm not using the Lifeline, which I think is a great invention. And I think if I wasn't hunting out of a ladder stand, I know I would be using them. That way, you're connected to the tree from the ground to the stand all the way up.
Yep.
But that may change. I still may find myself, using one of those. But I feel comfortable climbing up the ladder. But be safe. I mean, it's not worth it for any deer.
Yeah. Same way with pulling up a loaded gun or loaded bow, or I have a crossbow now.
Yep.
Make sure you don't have them loaded up.
Yep. Point the muzzle down. I mean, you don't want to be pulling that thing up, looking at it with that muzzle pointing right at you. Even if it's unloaded, don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, just basic firearm safety. But sometimes I think we can get a little laxed and sit on our thumbs a little bit, and that's when accidents
won't happen to me.
Yep. So enjoy it. Enjoy creation. There's so much out there that we're all thankful to get to experience. I know I don't take it for granted because I had several years where I didn't have that opportunity. I couldn't find a place to go sit in a tree or under a tree. now that I have it, I make sure I enjoy every bit of
You
it.
bet.
And the tradition of firearm season, it started here in Missouri. Illinois is coming. Enjoy those traditions. Pass those traditions on. Teach your children or your nephews or the neighbor kid or something. Mentor somebody. If you know somebody that wants to get out and hunt, please do what you can to get them out there and get them that experience. Because coming from a kid that wanted to and never had that opportunity, I know how much I would have appreciated it. So if you get that chance, don't hesitate to do it.
You bet.
So anyway, so that's going to wrap it up. I thank all you guys for listening. Please make sure that you check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube at DeerLand Podcast. You can check us out at the DeerLandPodcast.com. You can download us at any place that you download your regular podcast. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And we hope that you will be coming back for our next episode. We have that one lined up. We're going to have Ryan Kirby from Ryan Kirby Art. And also we're going to have the story of Louis Zinn's buck that he just killed here a few days ago. So you want to make sure that you check it out once we get it loaded. Have a good day. Have a good week. Enjoy gun season, and please be safe.